Question about book 12.
Book 12, the epilogue.
It has been written early, you know. It has been written early and not revised by Sri Aurobindo.
No, what do you mean hurried?
I mean, it was
Shevendra didn't do, you see, he wrote it in the early draft of Savitri,
which means which
around the Arya period,
sorry?
1916 to 1919. In that period, there were two sessions. So around 1918,
So early.
Huh?
So early.
Yes,
Book 12.
book 12.
Oh.
So that was a part of the earlier draft of Savitri. Earlier, one of the first complete drafts of Savitri. Now, it is that which was to be taken up again and revised. That canto, that book, and also the book of death, book 8. These two were from the earlier drafts of Savitri, belonging to the Arya period. Belong to the Arya period, you see. Now, both these drafts, both these cantos, have, so to say, not been really brought in a way up to date. They are not in the same style, same manner. The style is also different. That is a different kind of a narrative, whereas this is a different thing also. Yeah. And actually, when Sri Aurobindo dictated those last three passages in in November 1950, in the book of death, in the book of fate, he added three passages, one of 3 lines, one of 7 lines, one of 72 lines. He added those things around 15th November 1950. When that was done, then he asked Nirodharan, anything is remaining? Is there something remaining? And Nirodha at that time showed epilogue and the book of death, book 8 and book 12. And at that time, Sri Aurobindo said, yes, we shall see about them later. He said, we shall see about them later. And that later was not to come. Therefore, these people say that Savitri, as we are here today, has a seal, Nirodharan writes in his book, has a seal of incomplete completeness. He used the phrase incomplete completeness, you see. Now, the mother says, well, perhaps Sri Aurobindo just wanted to leave it there, that's all. How can you say complete or incomplete? He wanted to leave it there as it was, and that's all, you see. Well, of course, one can also argue that there are many things. You see, for instance, in the book of death, book 8, he calls it Canto 3. He calls it Canto 3. There is no Canto 1 and Canto 2 in that book at all, see. What about them? Now, this Canto 3, in fact, belongs to the earlier draft where the serial number happened to be 3 for this particular part, and therefore that 3 was retained. And when Nirodharan pointed out specifically to Sri Aurobindo, Canto 3, Sri Aurobindo said yes, and the tick mark in the margin against Canto 3 for the book of death. Tick mark is there, you see. It means that he meant Canto 3 as it was, you see, as we got here. So it means that Canto 1 and Canto 2 would have come. When he says yes, Canto 3, then he said it definitely means that Canto 1 and Canto 2 would have come. But Sri Aurobindo said that we shall see about that later on, so that later on was not to come. You see. Now, in a certain sense, we can understand why it was so. Because, see, in order to describe that particular part, one of them had to go through the actual experience of death, either mother or Sri Aurobindo. Then only it can be written, it can be authentic. It cannot be simply your imagination, your fancy, or your literary creation. If it has to have some kind of an occult bearing, then it should be the experience lived in death by either mother or Sri Aurobindo. It was not there. Therefore, it was left hanging. kind of thing. Now, one can understand what could have come. You see, after all, he is simply narrating like a story what happened about the day. That day morning, Savitri gets up early morning, she worships Goddess Durga, and they go to the forest, and all those things happen, you see, and Yama comes. That's all. Means as a kind of an episode, as a kind of a story that is narrated there, which is actually the story as we have got in the original story of Mahabharata, Vyasa Savitri. It is exactly that as it is produced, you see. But Sri Aurobindo's own personal experience of death, that is not there in that sense, you see. And that cannot come unless you experience it, you see. So that is why he said, leave it as it is, Canto 3, you see. About it, you see. Now, same thing about epilogue. It is exactly the same old narrative belonging to the Arya period and more or less corresponding to what we have in Vyasa Savitri, Mahabharata Savitri. But that cannot end that cannot end the narrative of Savitri, epic of Savitri. See, after all, he is talking of the coming of Krishna and Kali, or the Gnostic race, or the supramental race, or the future. Now, it is that kind of a thing which might have, in my opinion, come in the epilogue. See, that is why epilogue is not there. You see, if Sri Aurobindo starts writing in 1950 about the supramental race upon earth, about the Gnostic beings, about the divine manifestation here, then that would have been again not a fact, so to say, in 1950, but a vision, a possibility, and that would not have been a kind of a realized statement. To make it a realized statement, you have to wait for things to happen. You have to wait first for 1956, 29 February 1956, as the first major step. Then only you can talk of the supramental race and Gnostic beings and other things, you see. So, all that things were futuristic, and therefore Sri Aurobindo was, in a way of saying, careful not to make it ideal, not to make just an idea or an imagination or a creation of a poet. There has to be some kind of a concreteness. In other words, what we have in the rest of Savitri is something which has been actually spiritually, in an occult way, experienced and realized and established. Savitri is a work which has been kind of concretized in the workings of the earth. And therefore, naturally, book 8 and book 12 remain kind of excluded. Obviously. So that way I will say Sri Aurobindo was very particular, very careful. Careful means, well, it's kind of natural to him. What is done is what we have in Savitri. What will happen is futuristic. And I need not write about futuristic things because people say it's imagination, you see, it's a fiction, it is a poet's fancy, like that, you see. So Savitri would have, in that sense, got kind of diluted had it been there, you see. That is one aspect of it. The second aspect is, in one of the letters, at that time Savitri was not that big, it was relatively small. In one of the letters, Sri Aurobindo was mentioning about Savitri running into so many lines and like that, thousands of lines and all that thing. And Amal Kiran wrote to Sri Aurobindo, will Savitri be running into 50,000 lines? 50. Now it is roughly 24,000 lines. Will it be running into 50,000 lines?
Who said that?
50,000, 50. Amal Kiran, Amal. You see, in one of the letters, Sri Aurobindo was mentioning the composition of Savitri in the number, and Therefore, in response to that, Amal Kiran was asking him whether Savitri will run into 50,000 lines, you see, 50, you see. Shyamantu did not reply. He did not say yes, he did not say no. He did not say no also, he did not say yes also, you see. Obviously. So, in other words, that scope is there. The Gnostic race, how it will work, how it will happen, the future evolution, how it will proceed, all those things might come in those remaining 25,000 lines. Possibly, you see. And therefore, I will say that Shyamantu was very particular, very careful is a wrong word, but we can still use that word careful, that he will write only what has been done, what is achieved, what has been established, what has been realized. He will not make poetic statements of creation and all that sort of a thing. So, I will say that he was in that sense more scientific than most of the scientists are, you see. Precise in his statement, you see. Whether God exists or not, that is a question which is asked by Hawking, and he says, for me, God does not exist. Now, that is an absolutely foolish kind of a statement. He has no business to talk about science, about God, because it does not come in the purview of science. It does not come in the purview of science. So, what kind of statement you can make about God? Whether he is there or he is not there, you cannot say anything at all on the basis of your professional background and expertise. You can't opine at all on that thing. You take a fancy. Therefore, being a fancy, who cares for that? Who would care for that, you see? Now, that kind of a mistake Shyamantu will not make. That kind of a mistake he will not. See, even Einstein, he said, while giving the interpretation of quantum mechanics in terms of probability theory means chance. This will happen, it will go like this or it will go like that. 50% chance like this, 50% chance like that. Which one will definitely happen, science cannot tell. It is only after observation said this has happened due to the 50%. That 50% becomes 100%, it just happened, you see, like that. Now, see, in response to that, Einstein was not happy at all with that. About the probabilistic interpretation of quantum mechanics, Einstein never liked it, he was against it, and he said, does God play dice? Whether it will happen this way or that way, yes or no, does he play dice? Now, God playing dice, Einstein has no business to talk of whether God is playing dice or not. In what context he can say? Again, Einstein is making the same mistake there. God does not come in his purview. How do you know whether God plays dice or God doesn't play dice? You can't even say that, you see. So, even big people, very knowledgeable people, very competent people, they make this kind of statements which are beyond the field of their expertise. And therefore, they dilute the whole thing. Shyamantu will never do that kind of a thing. That is the moral I see why book 8 and book 12 are as they are here. As they are here. It's a very good justification for that. He will say what has been done, definitely. That is what Savitri is, you see. So if you want to call it complete or incomplete, well, it's up to you. I don't care.
There is a letter of Shyamantu to Amal Kiran. Shyamantu says Savitri has been written in an architectural way. Nothing is omitted in detail. He said that. So everything he has put everything in Savitri.
Yeah.
Like an architect.
That's true. Okay, so
nothing is missing in detail.
Yeah, that is true. But then I think you have to qualify it also to some extent. It is very true when you see the completed Savitri. If you see the earlier drafts of Savitri, you don't get that impression. Earlier drafts of Savitri, see, because things were not formulated in that manner at all. He was writing, okay, some piece here, some piece there, some piece there, some piece there, like that. He was writing. They didn't have that kind of an architectural wholeness. Even the fact that the very first canto, what we are doing here, December Dawn, I mean, it started in 1916, the first part, few lines. Then it went on expanding, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Even 1942, the draft was not complete of December Dawn. Only around 1945, you can see December Dawn as it is in the present form. Now, so when you talk of architectural completeness, at what point of complete time? See, at what point of time?
Yeah. I suppose at the end, no? When you wrote Cormac Kiran.
So, it be as a whole, not during those transition periods, because he was experimenting. He says, I use Savitri as a means to climb, to go up and all. As a means to climb, you see. And you are drafting in canto, this first canto, he wrote something 40, 50 times, back and forth. Actually, it's a good idea. We may see some of those things.
When he wrote December Dawn,
Yeah.
and you, let's say you take Savitri and you don't know.
Pardon me?
If one takes up Savitri and starts with the first chapter, like you're reading like a book you want to read, you don't start, and you don't know the story, you don't know actually, that the story in its main lines. You don't understand. I mean, the day Satyavan will die,
Yeah.
they have only 12 months.
Yeah.
This is kind of like, okay, we know the story, but if you don't know the story, it doesn't make any sense to write this in the first chapter, what will evolve much later. I mean, he doesn't give any summary in that sense where one can see the story of the evolution of Earth is, narrated like that. There will be Savitri and Satyavan, and then Mary, they have 1 year, then he dies, and she's conquering death, and like that. I mean, there is no story you.
Yeah. No, actually, the. No, actually, the. Huh?
He should have. I mean, there should be somewhere. If you want to know the story, read it in the Mahabharata.
No, but that background you have to separate. You have to build up yourself.
Yeah, but one doesn't.
You have to. No, it doesn't. Yeah, that is why all these supplement, all our books are for that purpose. So to say, you see, but it's not poet's concern to supply you the reading material. The poet's concern is to create a thing of his own vision. In order to see, it is not, see, you have got a textbook for an examination, but the textbook itself is not sufficient many times. So what do? You read supplementary material, there will be the teachers, there will be some other guides who will prepare their own guidelines, and then you go by those things also.